Yeah, sure. Meanies. Meanie pants. All right, you don't have to go that far first. Sorry. I'm sorry.
All right. So the epidermis is avascular, containing no blood. The dermis, which you can see on here, is the lighter pink color. That has blood vessels. So the blood vessels from the dermis will give off nutrients and water and electrolytes, and those will then move upward towards the dermal cells. So in the epidermis, which ones are the oldest cells? Are the ones down here or the ones up here? That's right. So they move further and further up as they get older and older and they die off in the top layer. So the youngest cells are the ones in the very bottom layer right here. That's where the cells are growing and dividing. And as they move upward, they get older, they get more flat, they get full of protein, and they die off. And so the ones that you feel in your top layer are all dead, and they're mostly just made of protein. And they die because they're further from the blood supply. So without the blood supply, cells die very quickly, and that's why your top layer of skin cells are not living anymore. Generally, it's about 30 to 40 cells in thickness. It can be 20, but generally 30 to 40 cells is how thick your epidermis is. Keratinization is a process of old cells, and they're called keratinocytes or keratinocytes. These are your skin cells that become full of keratin. Yes.
Is it like way thicker on your fingertips and stuff?
That's right. Yeah. So there's certain places in your body, like the soles of your feet, your fingers, your hands, that have thicker layers of skin cells than other places. So yeah, your epidermis is thicker in those regions. And it's thinnest on like your eyelids and your forehead, places like that.
Is that because they're used more?
That's right, exactly. So if they experience friction and pressure, then they need to have more layers of skin cells. And so the more you use a certain area of your skin, the more skin cells you're going to have. And that's why guitar players build up calluses on their fingertips, or your heels have calluses too. It just whenever your skin experiences friction, it's going to build up more skin cells in response to that to help protect your body. And so your skin gets thicker and tougher in those places. So skin cells become hardened by filling up with keratin. It's a protein that you can find also in your fingernails and your hair. And it makes the skin cells waterproof and tough. So we have those down. Okay, let's go through the different layers of your epidermis. So the epidermis has several layers, 5 to 6 layers, depending upon where you're looking on the body. The very bottom layer, the basal layer, the stratum basal, the deepest layer of epidermal cells. The dermis is right below that. So as I mentioned, this is where new cells are forming. This is the youngest epidermal cells. This is where they're made. This is where they divide. Now, moving up to this layer right here, the stratum lucidum. I don't think your book even has this layer. I don't know. There's a few that they don't show in your book. But this is only found in certain places in the body. It's only where your skin is the thickest. So like in the soles of your feet, the palms of your hands, you have the stratum lucidum only in those places. We don't have it really anywhere else in your body. So the amount of cells and the layers do vary based on the location of the skin. Yeah, if you're talking about like your feet, yeah. Now like a soul, like your spiritual soul, that's S-O-U-L, but yeah, soul for your feet. S-O-L-E. Does everybody have these down? So I forget which ones you had in your worksheet too, but again, like it just varies based on which worksheets you have, which layers you're going to see, because there's no standard layer of epidermal cells. It varies throughout your body. And then keratinocytes, as I mentioned, that's just a name for your epidermal cells that become full of keratin. And you can see as they move up, they get flatter and flatter. And the nucleus just disintegrates. And these ones are the dead ones with no nucleus. Moving up to the very top layer, the stratum corneum. Those is layers of tough, tightly packed dead skin cells. It's the thickest layer. Depending upon where it is in the body, it's about 20 to 30 cells in thickness. So skin cells are constantly falling off, and you're constantly getting new skin cells to replace the ones that have fallen off. You get a totally new epidermis about every 25 to 45 days. So all the cells in your skin are replaced about every month. And so that's why you write your skin with ink, and it's even permanent ink, and it comes off pretty quickly because you're constantly losing your skin cells. Now, if you tattoos, they'll go down to the dermal layer, which is below this. And in that case, it's permanent because the white blood cells pick up the ink and they keep it in place. But any ink in your dermis or your epidermis will fall off pretty quickly.
So is this dandruff? Is this
Yeah, dandruff would also be just dead skin that's falling off. Yeah, that's all it is. You're just seeing dead skin cells. So usually it's because your skin is dry that you see dandruff. And it's just usually on your scalp, but it's just dead skin cells in your scalp that are just flaking off. So, but usually the best way to prevent that is to, use different kinds of soaps that help protect your moisture, and also just not taking really long hot showers. That can also help dry. Because if your skin gets too dry through hot water, through long showers, then you get more dandruff. But those are two things you can do to help with that. But I mean, it looks gross, but it's just skin. That's all it is. It's nothing to be alarmed about. This gives you a better idea of how thick the top layer of skin is. And it does depend upon where you are in the body on how thick this layer is. But it is the thickest layer of skin, the very top layer, stratum corneum. And these are all dead keratinocytes. Stratum lucidium, as you can see in here, it's more of a pale white color. And that's not going to be found except in, again, palms of your hands, soles in your feet. I mentioned calluses before, and this shows you a callus. Sorry, I just lost it. You can have them really all over your body, but especially in places where you experience a lot of wear and tear. So it's common on the heels of your feet, common on your toes, fingers, things like that. So if too many cells are lost, the skin wears away, your body responds to that by making more skin. And that's what a callus is. It's just an overgrowth of skin in response to undergoing friction. So generally they're not painful. I mean, it's just a bunch of dead skin cells. So they usually don't hurt. You can kind of feel pressure sometimes if you're trying to wear shoes, and you can sometimes can feel that, but for the most part, they're pretty painless. You don't even know if they're there. And this picture also shows you what a bunion looks like. That's when the bone sticks out right here. And so that's not actually skin, that's just the bone that is moving outward. And that can cause irritation if you don't have the right kinds of shoes. Everybody have these down? Melanin is the pigment in your skin that gives it color. So everybody has the same number of melanocytes, which are cells that make pigment. The difference between skin color is how much pigment your cells make. So a melanocyte looks like a spider. It travels throughout your skin cells and gives them pigment. This person down here is an albino. He would, if it was working properly, he would look very dark. He's from Africa and he would have very dark skin if the pigment was actually there. But the melanocytes aren't working properly. He has a genetic disorder where the cells are there, but they don't make pigment. And so he really has almost no pigment. So melanocyte, you can see right here, it's this dark brown area, and the black specks are pigment. It gives pigment to the skin cells. And they make these little umbrellas that go over the nucleus to shade it from the sun. So basically it's built in sunblock and it keeps the cells from being destroyed and the nucleus especially from being destroyed from UV radiation.
Would that be a sunburn if it got destroyed?
Well, if the skin cells get destroyed, yes, that would be a sunburn. Now, if the nucleus gets destroyed, that can cause cancer. So yeah, at first you would see a sunburn, and then if the cells mutate, you get cancer from that. People with very dark skin don't usually get sunburned. They don't usually get cancer because they're protected by the melanocytes, and they have built-in sunblock, which is over the nucleus. The cells are protected from that. The melanosome holds the melanin in place. So these are little pockets right here. These little dots are melanosomes. And it's just a little vesicle that transmits melanin to the skin cells to give them pigmentation. So as I mentioned, melanin absorbs UV radiation that prevents the nucleus from being damaged, preventing cancers. Skin color is due to how much melanin you have. The number of melanocytes is constant in people, no matter how dark or light their skin is. The difference is how much melanin the melanocytes produce. That gives you different skin colors. You can see the variation of skin color based on where you are in the world. So around the equator, where the sun is brightest, you can see that you have the darkest skin color. And as you get further from the equator, you get lighter and lighter skin. So it makes sense that around the equator, you're going to have really dark skin because it's built in sunblock. You're not prone to sunburn or skin cancer. But why would you need to have lighter skin as you go up north? Because that's also something that you need. You need to have light skin when you go up north as well. That's to do with what we talked about yesterday in class, about vitamin D.
Oh, you need to get more of it.
That's right. Like it's harder to get, because vitamin D is made from what? Sunlight hitting your skin. So if you are really dark skin, you won't get very much vitamin D because the sunlight needs to be able to come in to your cells to make vitamin D. And it can't do that very well if you have melanin. Thank you.
When the sun reflects off the snow, does it also affect the UV?
It does. Yeah, that's actually why Eskimos are pretty dark skinned. So Eskimos, live very far up north, but they actually do have darker skin than you would expect. And they live in places where it's always snowing and they don't ever have anything except snow on the ground. And so the UV radiation is stronger because of that reflection off the snow. That's a good point to bring up. So usually your genes are what determine how much melanin you have. Now within your genes, you do have a range of colors you can be. And that depends upon how much you're outside, your diet. But it's pretty, I mean, it's not much of a change that you can make on your own.
Wait,
Mhm.
Polly, have people, like, I don't know if it's weird, but like in South Africa, have people like gotten darker like over time? Like, people like who came from Europe centuries ago and like lived there and they still live in South Africa?
Well, South Africa, you're gonna be pretty pale at that
Yeah.
because it's pretty far away from the equator.
So,
You can see this is South Africa right here,
yeah.
and that's equivalent to what we're seeing right here in the Midwest.
Yeah.
So it's actually gets pretty cold there, and it doesn't, and the sun's not very intense in that place. And so you're naturally going to be, they have a lot of blonde hair, blue-eyed people in South Africa naturally. Because the climate is pretty similar to what you'd see in Europe. So- Well, and also you have European immigrants as well, but that's part of it. But the climate is again on par to what you'd see in the Midwest and in Europe. And so the sunlight is not that bright down there. Africa is a huge continent,
Yeah.
and so it has a wide range of climates. You can see in this chart, there's 6 genes represented by these boxes right here that control pigment. And so that gives you a wide variation in color. If none of them are turned on, you have the palest skin possible. If they're all turned on down here, you have the darkest skin possible. And you get different combinations of ones that are turned on or turned off. And the more than we have turned on, the darker your skin's going to be. And again, of course, I mean, your environment also has some effect on your skin color. So your genes give you a range of colors you can have, and then based on your choices you make, what you eat, if you're outside, you can have a little bit of a different skin color, but it can't vary a whole lot based on your genes.
What foods make your skin?
Well, carrots would be one thing that have a bright pigmentation. So if you don't eat healthy, you're not well nourished, you're gonna have paler skin than if you are well nourished. Also, if you have low blood supply, and that's just due to, it could be due to anemia, we have low iron, you're gonna look really pale. If you are active and you work out, you have more blood supply to your skin looks pinker, redder, and more healthy. So those are a few things that can affect how your skin looks. Your activity and your diet can affect it somewhat. Okay, so did we have these down? This is also similar to what you'd see in hair color. So we have a wide variety of hair color too, based on several genes that control your hair color. And that's why we have a spectrum of hair color as well. We don't just have, 3 colors like brown, red, and blonde. We have different kinds of brown, red, because we have different variations in genes we can make.
How does the sun affect your hair color?
It's similar. Now it can do two. I mean, it can lighten or darken your pigment. And so the sun, by hitting the pigment, can change how it looks. And so some people, they get blonder in the summertime. And that's generally what happens. So usually you're going to have lighter hair in the summertime because the UV radiation will destroy some of the pigment and make your hair look lighter.
So your hair can get darker like with some people?
It definitely can, yeah.
How would that work with the radiation?
It's different kinds of pigmentation. So you have different pigmentation in your hair. There's basically 2 kinds, pheomelanin and eumelanin. They make different kinds of hair colors. And if the sun, it kind of like, in the fall time when the leaves change color, they change color because the green pigmentation is destroyed. And they always had yellow or red in their leaves. You just didn't see it until the green was destroyed. So it's similar to what you'd see in your hair. If one pigment is destroyed, you might see other colors come out. And so you might see blonde hair come out if you destroy the pigment that makes dark hair. But you can also have the reverse happen too. But that's something that can happen. Also, so that's generally what's happening in the sunlight is that it usually lightens it, but it doesn't always. It can also do other things too. Chlorine in the pool can also change your hair color as well. The combination of chlorine in the sun can change your hair. And that can darken it too. Chlorine especially can have a darkening effect on your hair. Epidermal dendritic cells, also called Langerhans cells. These are nerves in your epidermis that alert and activate the immune system. You can see it right here. It looks like a yellow star. So when you've been injured, when you have an invader, they look out for that and they alert the immune system when that happens. And it causes inflammation at that point. It brings in fluid to flush out the invader, the toxin. If you're injured, it recruits new cells to replace the injured tissue. And then as you heal, it recruits white blood cells to eat up any dead cells. Merkel cells are touch receptors. You can see it in blue right here. So these cells act with the nervous system to help you have a sense of touch. So you have a lot of them in your fingertips, for example. So the more sensitive you are, the more Merkel cells you're going to have. And so those are going to vary based on your location. Like your elbows won't have a whole lot, but your fingertips have a whole lot of Merkel cells. And you can see right here, the Merkel cell is attached to the neuron in yellow right here. And that goes onto your brain to let you know that you're sensing. Okay, so that's the epidermis. We went to the dermis. That's going to be this light color right here below the purple. There's two main layers of the dermis. You have a papillary layer and reticular layer. So the papillary layer, you can see, creates these grooves, which can move up to your skin and create texture on your skin. That's how you have fingerprints. So the changes in your papillary layer will create fingertips and the ridges, fingerprints, not fingertips, fingerprints that gives you different textures on your fingers. The reticular layer is below that. That's mostly made of elastin and collagen, connective tissue that gives your skin elasticity and toughness. So the dermis, just like the epidermis, varies in thickness based on the location in your body. So based on genes, the papillary layer will have different grooves to give you different fingerprints. So identical twins have the same exact genes, but even twins have different fingerprints. Does anybody know why that is? That's right, exactly. Yeah, when the baby is formed, so they press against the walls of the womb, and by pressing against the walls of the womb, they create different fingerprints. So everybody has a unique set of fingerprints because their genes and the way they move in the womb will affect how their fingerprints turn out. But once you are born, it's set. And at that point, you won't change your fingerprint pattern for your whole life. And it's a unique pattern for you. It doesn't change. Now, some people, some criminals will try to burn up their fingerprints. They'll use chemicals or fire. Well, you can if you really try, but I'm sure it's very, very painful. But yeah, if you have really, really bad scarring, that can change your fingerprints. I know for me, when I went to work at the airport, they had to do a background check on me. I had to get scanned and get fingerprints, and they could not get my fingerprints on my left hand because I had so many chemicals burned on my hand throughout college. I had no fingerprints left on my left hand. So it can happen where I did, yeah, for a long time.
Like when?
2005 to 2010. So I worked partly in college, and then partly when I was working here at Faustine, I would work nights and weekends.
Like what did you do?
So I was at a bookstore. Terminal D is the international airport. There's a Starbucks and a bookstore. So it was really nice to be in a Starbucks because I would have a free drink every morning. But yeah, it was really nice. But yeah, it was really fun. And I mean, you could see a lot of different people there. I mean, you'd see all kinds of people. I mean, politicians, musicians, I mean, like all kinds of famous people go through there, athletes. So it was really exciting.
What's the coolest person?
Ozzy Osbourne was pretty cool to see. ZZ Top went through there. Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston, they were there. Ava Longoria, John McCain, Dirk Nowitzki, Mike Modano, Tony Romo.
You saw Tom
I didn't-
Cruise, right?
Do what?
You saw Tom Cruise, right?
Tom Cruise? I didn't see him, but I think one of my friends saw him, if I remember. But no, I didn't see. What's really funny is Lady Antebellum was. I didn't know they were there. I didn't know who that was though, but I didn't recognize them. I had heard their songs, but I didn't recognize them. And so the coworker in Starbucks was freaking out, like waving at me, let me know who they were. And I had no idea what they were saying. And so like the whole time I was looking at my coworker, not looking at the people in front of me. And so I think I would have recognized them if they actually looked at them. But they were just so excited that they came through our airport. So, but there's a lot of different people we saw. I mean, just, I can't think of everybody I saw, but seemed like every day there was somebody, or they wore sunglasses and hats. So you knew they were famous, but you didn't know who they were exactly. That happened a lot too. So, but it was really fun. I really recommend it. The airport is really a lot of fun to work at. Dermal papillae. These are ridges on the dermis, and that's what creates your fingerprints. A particular layer of the dermis below that is your deepest layer of skin. Below that, you have the fat layer. So the, oh, yeah. This bottom one I'm gonna have in the next slide too. So in the reticular layer in your dermis, that's where you have the blood vessels. You can see this picture right here. They spread out through here. You have the sweat glands. So it's all this pale area that you're seeing, and you can see it's the majority of things in your skin. You have sweat glands, which are these little tubes right here that go up to a pore that spill on your skin. Oil glands, which are along your hair follicle. Deep pressure sensors. I'm not seeing one on, oh yeah, well, there's some right here. These yellow dots right here are pressure sensors. And so they're activated when you press down to this area right here. So there's also lighter pressure sensors right here, which would sense lighter touch. That's how you get a sense of how much pressure you have in your skin. Based on which ones are activated, you can get a sense of how much pressure you're feeling. Other nervous receptors are only going to measure hot temperatures or cold temperatures. Others measure pain. You also have white blood cells going through their phagocytes, which pick up any dead debris, foreign invaders.
You can't like damage all that stuff in their finger.
Oh, you definitely can, yeah.
Like pushing.
Oh, sure you could, yeah. That's when you get a bruise. So if you get a bruise, what happens is you've broken your blood vessels in this area and you damage your skin. And then stretch marks would be when you cracked this layer of skin. So yeah, you can, any kind of bruising you see would be breaking the dermis and damaging that layer of skin. You can see right here, the fat layer gives you a lot more blood vessels in the dermis, but you definitely have some in the dermis. So you'd bleed a lot more if you got cut down here than right here, but you still would bleed usually in this area when it's cut. You generally don't bleed if it's cut up here because no blood up here. You have a lot of collagen and elastin in this area. That gives the skin toughness. Collagen does that. Elastin gives it flexibility. As you get older, you lose collagen, and that makes the skin sag. It's not going to be as stiff.
Wait, is this in the reticulum?
Yes. And then with stretch marks, you basically, what happens is the dermis is teared and you don't have collagen filling in those areas. And so you have an area that's a lot softer than the rest of the dermis because of that. You have the hair follicle right here. That's where the new hair cells are created at this point. And as they're pushed up, they become dead. Really, the rest of the hair right here is just protein. You only really have cells with a nucleus at this base right here. So DNA would not be present in anywhere in your hair except the very root of your hair. So if you pull out the hair from your root, the root would contain DNA, but the rest of your hair, really, it's just protein. It won't contain any cells with DNA in them.
So like in a crime scene, if you just like you got cut up here.
Yeah, you wouldn't have DNA. It's only the root. So if you pull out the root of your hair, you would, but only the root would contain cells that have DNA. So essentially your hair is just protein. And we talk about hair being dead cells. It's really, think of it more as just a chemical than cells. It's really just made of protein. That's it. Like your fingernail, it's similar to that, where it's just really just protein and nothing else.
And we don't use that
You
much.
pull out the whole root, does it come back?
It does, yeah. It grows back. It just takes some time, but it'll grow back.
We don't use that protein for anything.
The protein, I mean, like in the body, protein, of course, is made to make muscles and cells and things like that. But after it's then made for hair, then it just stays there. And it's not really usable at that point. We can't really break that back down. It's really hard to digest or to break down. So it just stays as hair at that point. Do you have that down? We mentioned this earlier about bed sores. And this just gives you another picture of what it looks like. So this is a person who's bedridden. They are in the hospital and they can't get out of bed. And they're supposed to be moved around and turned so that they don't develop this. So this is, if this happens to a person, they're not being treated properly in the hospital nursing home because they need to be moved more often. And what happens is the bone right here presses down on the muscle and the skin, and that cuts off blood supply, and the cells die without blood supply. And as they die, you see an ulcer form. And so they can get different stages of ulcers. You can have just like a red mark, like a sunburn, but then it can start to bleed and go down to your epidermis, dermis, your fat layer, down to even bone if it's not treated. But if people are properly cared for in hospitals, this won't happen. So this is something that should not happen to a person. It only happens if people are not able to turn them like they're supposed to. Diabetics would get them on their feet if they're not cared for either. But as long as a diabetic is careful and monitoring, how they're feeling, and using the right kind of medicine and making sure they wear the right kind of socks and things like that, they won't get ulcers either. But it can happen if it's not treated diabetes, or if they're not careful, they can develop ulcers, especially on their feet and their hands. But that's usually the place where we have ulcers. It's just through bad blood circulation, which could be through inactivity, being in bed, or having something like diabetes where you just have naturally bad circulation. But it's something you can treat as long as you're careful and monitor it. You don't get to that point. So you can see right here the pressure areas when a person laying in bed. Those would be the major areas you have ulcers. It's where the bone hits the skin. Yeah. So it's also called decubitus ulcers. These are ulcers that are just formed by pressure. Anybody who's in bed for too long, like in hospital or nursing home, who's not being treated properly. So if you're in a good nursing home or hospital, this won't happen to you. It's only if you have people who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing and moving you around. On this one, just right on the last bullet point here, that as the cells die, the tissue breaks down. That's called necrosis, when the cells start to die due to lack of blood supply. So you can also see in this picture that you have nerve cells scattered throughout the dermis. They're the ones that are in yellow. All these ones right here. So some are motor neurons. And these carry impulses from the brain to the dermal muscles and the glands. It tells the muscles to move, and it tells the sweat glands to secrete sweat, oil glands to secrete oil. And so it controls different functions in the dermal layer. No, sorry. And you don't see it on here, but the muscle layer will be below that. So this is the pale pink area right here. So you'd have the fat right above the muscle layer. Cyanosis can happen when you have low oxygen supply. So your skin can turn blue when you are really oxygen deprived. So let's go through different reasons why you might have changes in skin color. So if you have blue, especially on your lips or on your fingernails or fingertips, that means you need to get more oxygen. Your blood system is going to be bright red with oxygen, and it turns darker without oxygen. And that's why you see purple, blue when you're oxygen deprived. So blushing happens when you have more blood going into an area in the body. And so your blood system makes your skin change color. If you have more blood on your skin, it's going to look pink to red. Less blood is going to look pale. I mentioned this earlier. Carotenonemia is when you eat too many carrots and you have beta carotene, which is an orange pigment, and it can make your skin change to an orange color. And that's if you have a lot of carrots. I mean, it depends on the person, you know, like how much they weigh, what else they eat in their diet.
Trump's a rabbit.
Do what?
Trump's a rabbit.
Well, I think he's just like, I don't think it's a natural color on him. So it's not, I mean, it's not a common thing, but you can definitely have more of an orangish tint to you if you have a lot of carrots in your diet. It's more common in children and babies than older people and adults. So also, if you feel hot, you might blush because the blood supply is trying to get rid of heat. And so it will move blood up to your skin, which turns it red. So on a hot day, you're going to have red skin because the blood is very close to your skin to move heat away from your body. And on a cold day, just the opposite. You're going to have pale skin because the blood is very deep into your body and you have less blood to your skin, so it doesn't look as pink as it normally does. Jaundice is a yellow skin color. And that's due to bilirubin building up in your skin. And so, do you know why you get jaundice?
Is that from kidney failure?
Close. What else? Not your liver. Your liver is failing.
Close to the-
So jaundice would result in a liver malfunction. It can be due to, usually it's pretty common in babies when they're first born, the liver's not fully developed. And so it's not something to worry about in a baby because it's pretty common. It will correct itself as the baby gets older. But if you're an adult and you have jaundice, it's a more serious thing because it's not supposed to happen. You can have hepatitis, you could have some kind of liver failure that needs to be checked out. This is a really severe jaundice case when even the yellow in your eye, when even the eyes turn yellow. That's a pretty bad case. There can be less severe cases where it's just your yellow is just very, very faint and just on your skin, not in your eyes. Bilirubin is a blood byproduct. When your blood is broken down in your liver, it creates bilirubin. And if you have a lot of yellow in your skin, the liver is not working properly. It's not breaking down the bilirubin fast enough. This is also why bruising creates yellow. It's your blood being broken down. And as the blood is broken down, you create a yellow color, which you see sometimes in bruising. So for babies, if they have jaundice, usually it's just they'll wait it out. And as you get older, it corrects itself. But to get rid of the yellow color, UV radiation can break down the bilirubin for them. So babies with jaundice are put in these UV radiation places where it breaks it down on its own. As I mentioned with bruising, you can see lots of times. So bruising, again, it's bleeding below the skin and you just have a popped blood vessel below the skin. And so what you see as bruising is blood, a scab that's formed below your skin. So as the blood is broken down, you will see bilirubin produced, which is the yellow color out there. So a hematoma is the scientific word for a bruise. So you might hear a doctor say you have a hematoma. That just means a bruising. It's a bruise bleeding below the skin. Now they can be serious though. If you have hematoma, say in your brain, that's a very serious thing. So they're not always something that's harmless. They can be serious if they're in a certain location in the body. Okay, let's stop here for today. Did you turn in your worksheets in questions 6 through 8? Homework today, it's 9 through 10. On page 119, do questions 9 and 10.